And so, houses of worship in the Protestant tradition become as aesthetic as possible. In contrast, at the turn of the 16th and 17th centuries, the emphasis in Catholic churches was on decoration on a larger scale. As we enter the new century, we see the development of a new style in art. One of the richest rooms in the Met's collection is undoubtedly the Baroque room. The Baroque is a style of European art and architecture from the 17th and 18th centuries. At different times, the term Baroque has had different meanings: whimsical, strange, prone to excess. At the present time, it is used in art history works for the style dominating in the European art between Mannerism and Rococo. That is from approximately 1600 to the beginning of the 18th century. From Mannerism, Baroque art inherited dynamicism and a deep emotionality, and from the Renaissance it was grounded and scrumptious. The features of both styles merged harmoniously into a single whole. The origin of the term is not entirely clear. Sometimes it is derived from a Portuguese term which means pearl of fanciful form, sometimes from a concept denoting a type of logical syllogism. There is no consensus about the content of this concept. There is an ambiguity of interpretation. It is defined as a cultural epoch, but often limited to the concept of artistic style. The most characteristic features of the Baroque style, striking colorfulness and dynamicism, corresponded to the self-confidence and aplomb of the newly acquired power of the Roman Catholic Church. Outside Italy, the Baroque style had its deepest roots in Catholic countries, while in Britain, for example, its influence was slight. Two great Italian painters, Caravaggio and Annibale Carracci, who produced their most important works in the last decade of the 16th century through the first decade of the 17th century, are at the origins of the Baroque art tradition in painting. Italian painting of the late 16th century is characterized by unnaturalness and stylistic uncertainty. Caravaggio and Carracci brought integrity and expressiveness back to Italian painting with their art. In the large hall of the Baroque, we are looking at amazing characters, creations of the brilliant masters of the era. And acquaintance with them, we will start with the recognized genius of Caravaggio. Michelangelo Maurici da Caravaggio was a famous Italian painter, author of religious paintings. He mainly painted young men and dramatic subjects on religious themes. His works are exhibited in the best galleries of the world: Uffizi, Hermitage, Metropolitan Museum of Art, Louvre, Prado. The founder of the style of his own name, whose hallmark is the dramatic effect of brightly lit areas contrasting with the dark background, he was one of the first to use the camera obscura to create paintings. Denial of St. Peter, one of Caravaggio's later works. It presents a marvel of narrative brevity. The canvas was painted during the last months of Caravaggio's turbulent life and marks an extreme stage in his revolutionary style. Standing before the soldiers, a woman accuses Peter of being a follower of Jesus. The soldier's index finger and the woman's two fingers allude to Peter's 3 accusations and 3 rebuttals. And in the contrast to the dramatic themes is another of the master's canvases musicians, 1597. While Cupid confirms Caravaggio's allegorical structure to represent music, the artist engages contemporary performances and individualized models in equal measure, including a self-portrait in the face of the second boy on the right. Caravaggio's contemporary, Giovanni Baglione, recorded that the artist painted a concerto in which several young men are very well depicted from nature. Immediately after joining the house of his first great patron, Cardinal Francesco Maria del Monte, we will meet these central boys' faces more than once more in various museums around the world. Other representatives of this style are Carracci, a family of Italian painters of the Bolognese school; Agostino, 1557 to 1602; Annibale, 1560 to 1609, and their cousin, Lodovico, 1555 to 1619. They essentially turned Bologna into a kind of center of 17th century Italian painting. In 1585, they founded the Academy of those who set out on the right path, whose teachers focused on drawing from life. It was they who laid the foundation of classical art education. In 1595, Annibale, considered the most talented of the brothers, moved to Rome. In the 17th and 18th centuries, his paintings on the plafond of the Palazzo Farnese were equated with the Sistine Chapel paintings by Michelangelo and the Vatican frescoes by Raphael. But in the 19th century, his fame faded. Currently, Annibale Carracci is ranked on a par with his great contemporary Caravaggio. Agostino Carracci is known as a teacher and engraver. After the brothers moved to Rome, Lodovico Carracci took over the academy in Bologna. All three Carracci are known as brilliant draftsmen. Coronation of the Virgin after 1595 by Annibale Carracci. This majestic painting, A Widow to the Sky, was painted for Cardinal Pietro Aldobrandini after the artist arrived in Rome in 1595. In it, Annibale brings together two strands of Italian painting: the sensitivity of northern Italy to the effects of natural light and color, and the spatial organization and idealized figures associated with Raphael. The figure of God the Father was based on the ancient Roman sculpture of Jupiter. Together with Caravaggio, Annibale Carracci was the most influential artist of the 17th century and a major figure in the development of classicism. A painting of another member of the family, Ludovico Carracci, Lamentations, 1582. This striking painting depicts Christ with a directness and lack of idealization that shocked 16th century critics, while the figures of the Virgin, the Three Marys, and St. John are strikingly stylized. Rather than an abstract sense of harmony and beauty, characterizes Ludovico's early works. A landmark reform of Carracci's painting, the painting belonged to Alessandro Tanari, papal treasurer of Bologna and passionate collector of Ludovico's paintings. A very interesting genre scene in the painting is two children teasing Annibale Carracci's cat. The year of painting is unknown. Viewers of this painting are invited to imagine the result of teasing a clearly disgruntled cat. This painting is one of the earliest Italian genre paintings. One of the famous Spanish artists who worked in Italy was José de Ribera, the Little Spaniard, a 17th century Caravaggio, painter and engraver, bright representatives of Baroque art. As court painter to the Spanish viceroys in Naples, Ribera painted on mythological and biblical subjects and was particularly successful with scenes from the lives of the saints. Themes of hermitage and martyrdom are resolved by Ribera in the key of sharp drama, using contrast of light and shadow and expressive positions of figures. The Tears of St. Peter, c. 1612-13. This early work is first mentioned in 1644 in the collection of Cardinal Benedetto Monaldi Velladici in Rome. St. Peter, with red eyes with tears and hands folded in prayer, is shown after his denial of Christ. Tears of repentance were celebrated in verse and song and were the key to the practice of the devotional service. Having lost influential patrons and painting commissions after the change of power in Naples, Ribera turned to graphic art, using Caravaggio's contrasting luminosity from the realm of painting to printmaking. The experience proved successful. Ribera's etchings are strikingly realistic and are considered to be the best created by Spanish engravers before Goya. There are several etchings in the museum's collection. One of the famous ones is the Drunken Silenus. An intoxicated man is holding a cup into which a satyr pours wine. 1628. This engraving is often considered his greatest. It refers to a painting he made 2 years earlier that is now in the Capodimonte Museum in Naples. In the foreground, Silenus is crowned by Pan, who can be recognized by his leopard skin cloak, trumpets, and staff at his feet. Silenus raises the cup to take another sip of wine. His action is humorously repeated by the two infants on the right. Engaged in similar actions, one of whom has passed out. A roaring donkey on the right adds to the hilarity of the composition. Another representative of the Italian Baroque school is Giacchino the Squint. His real name is Giovanni Francesco Barbieri. Francesco Giacchino was formed as an artist under the influence of Lodovico Carracci. He did not study directly at the Academy of the New Paths, founded by the Carracci brothers. His early works are executed with an increased dramatization of light and shadow. This technique only superficially resembles the manner of Caravaggio. This is borrowed from the schools of painting of northern Italy, Ferrara and Venice. Giacchino's talent was noticed by the Papal Legate in Ferrara, Cardinal Serra, for whom he painted a number of works. Serra was a well-known collector in Rome and also promoted Rubens. One of the paintings from Serra's collection is the canvas that today adorns the Baroque Hall at the Meath, Samson in the Captivity of the Philistines. According to the Bible, Samson, whose power came from his hair, was cut short by his two-faced lover Delilah, and then attacked by the Philistines, who bound and blinded him. The focus of this dramatic and wonderfully staged composition, a milestone in the artist's career, is the vigorously modeled back of Samson struggling to free himself. This is one of several commissions from Cardinal Giacomo Serra, Papal Legate of Ferrara. This work, particularly Samson's muscular back, gives a clear indication of the artist's skill in accumulating anatomical knowledge of the body. Only 100 years ago, a young Dürer was wandering around Italy trying to find treatises on anatomy, and here we have the crowning glory of bodybuilding. If a person has muscles, look how professionally I portray them. They are the main characters in the picture. But back to the north of Europe again. The war with Spain ended with the recognition of Dutch independence, and the country became Protestant. This radically changed the art of Holland. Having gained independence, the merchant population expressed their satisfaction with the joys of life: beautiful, solid houses, cheerful company, and good clothes. In short, they were bourgeois and needed paintings that reflected the contentment of bourgeois prosperity. Portraits, interiors, genre paintings, scenes of daily life, and rich still lifes, painted on medium-sized canvases for hanging in ordinary homes. This was the beginning of the Dutch Golden Age, 1610 to 80, during which time the school of Dutch realism established itself as one of the greatest movements of oil painting in art history. The best Baroque paintings from leading authors, such as Rembrandt and Vermeer, represent the pinnacle of the artist's creative achievements. Few people have not heard the name of the brilliant Dutch painter Rembrandt van Rijn. His genuine interest in the inner world of man leads him to psychological portraiture. He was probably a good psychologist, able to convey mood and drama in the portrait, in paintings on biblical and mythological themes, as well as in genre paintings. Among his great paintings, such as The Night Watch, The Return of the Prodigal Son, or The Vandal Damage Given, the Met owns a fine painting of Aristotle with a bust of Homer in 1653. This painting conveys Rembrandt's reflections on the meaning of fame. The richly dressed Greek philosopher Aristotle, 384 to 322 BC, rests his hand pensively on a bust of Homer, the father of history, the epic poet who achieved literary immortality with the Iliad and the Odyssey centuries ago. Aristotle wears a gold medallion with the portrait of his mighty disciple, Alexander the Great. Perhaps the philosopher is comparing his worldly success with Homer's timeless achievement. Although the work is considered typically Dutch, it was painted for a Sicilian patron at a time when Rembrandt's signature style, with its dark palette and almost sculptural overlay of paint, was beginning to go out of fashion in Amsterdam. It is common practice for an artist to hone his skills by using himself or his loved ones as nature. He painted his first wife, Sassouk, a lot. Saskia is a passionate, fun-loving, naughty artist's wife. She loves to dress up and change her appearance. she likes to pose in the clothes of mythological and biblical beauties. Her husband wants her to live in his art, embodied in these heroines, and creates a whole gallery of mythological female images. Each has the face of Saskia. These portraits are now scattered in museums around the world. Flora is on display at the Hermitage Museum, Russia. Another Flora is in the National Gallery in London. Saskia as Sophonisba, Madrid, Prado Museum. Saskia as Minerva is in a private collection. And the Metropolitan Museum of Art is proud of its Saskia as Bellona. Typical of Rembrandt's domestication of an ancient myth, this depiction of the Roman goddess of war may have reflected the Dutch readiness for conflict during the 80 Years' War with Spain. Rather than seeking an idealized source in ancient sculpture, Rembrandt based his depiction of the deity on a modern woman. The brilliant surfaces of Bellona's armor and intimidating shield allowed the young artist to bravura his skills. I will tell you about Rembrandt's art as a portrait painter later, and it will also be interesting. The next brilliant Northern Baroque painter is Jan Vermeer. And while Rembrandt, a follower of the Caravaggio style of art, highlighted parts of the dark canvas, Vermeer is a singer of diffuse, subdued light. There are about 36 recognized paintings by the master. The Met is proud of its collection of 5 paintings. A Young Woman with a Jug of Water, ca. 1662. Standing at an open window, the woman begins her day with an ablution from a gilded silver jug and basin, with linen covers protecting her dress and hair. Vermeer's first work to enter an American collection, this painting embodies the artist's interest in domestic themes, giving an almost voyeuristic view of a woman's private life before she presents her public face to the world. Note the distribution of light through the open window and stained glass, the softness, the naturalness, the pastelness. Such masterful light art has never seen before. Another painting and another light in the window. A Young Woman with a Lute, c. 1662-63. A young woman looks out the window, tuning her lute. Open songbooks and a viola da gamba on the floor indicate that she is preparing for a duet. Wealthy young men in the Dutch Republic studied music as part of their education, and amateur concerts provided a welcome opportunity to flirt. The map of Europe in the background reflects the decoration of Dutch houses at the time, a sign of pride in the country's superiority in navigation and cartography. We will also get a closer look at this girl specifically in the portrait section. The preservation of the painting leaves much to be desired, but the theatricality and naturalness at the same time allows us to feel the Dutch cloudy day, the muted light, which gives the canvas a homely and tranquil atmosphere. The artist did not skimp on allegorical themes either. The painting I want to present you has an interesting story. The famous Russian collector Shuchukin brought the painting allegory of the Catholic faith. He showed the painting to his friend, the artist, who rendered the verdict garbage and rubbish. Shuchukin sold the picture, and then it turned out that it was then unknown creation of Jan Vermeer, whose works are still not in Russia. And now Vermeer's allegory, Ephros, the director, wrote, hangs in the Hague Museum, approved in its great title. If it had stayed with us, it would have been the only Vermeer of Russian museums. In 1931, the canvas came into the possession of the Metropolitan. Allegory of the Catholic Faith, c. 1670-72. This painting, made at a time when public worship was forbidden in the Dutch Republic, uses the complex language of allegory to depict the triumph of the Catholic Church. A woman representing the church itself places one foot on the globe, while in the foreground the cornerstone of the church is crushed by the serpent of evil. Vermeer converted to Catholicism before his marriage, and this painting, which shows a table set with a bowl, missal, and crucifix, may also refer to the celebration of Mass in hidden churches in private homes. The crucifixion scene in the background is based on a painting by the Flemish painter Jacob Jordaens from the Vermeer collection. Incidentally, in a Protestant country, Vermeer remained Catholic. a fine example of society's religious tolerance. Genre painting was present in the works of artists even before the Reformation. The revolution in genre painting happened in the second half of the 17th century. The artists began to paint domestic life. Jan Steen was the greatest genre painter of his time, who managed to preserve and increase the democratic traditions of Dutch art. A promiscuous family, c. 1663 to 64. The artist often became the object of his own jokes, placing his self-portrait in the center of domestic chaos. Here, the artist intertwines his fingers with those of the maid, who pours his wife a generous portion of wine. Broken glass, a mischievous cat, and noisy boys give the overall impression of a crumbling household. Suggestions of an ominous fate hang literally over the heads of the family in the form of a basket with a crutch and a beggar's jar, as well as rattles, which were then used to warn of leprosy or plague, and a jack of spades, signifying misfortune. Another important artist of this time was Rembrandt's creative rival in the art of portraiture, Frans Hals. Portraiture as an element of art has not disappeared from people's lives for many centuries. All the more remarkable is the artist's painting, A Young Man and a Woman in an Inn, 1623. This painting is a cheerful and unbiased depiction of a young couple in the doorway of an inn or brothel. The flushed cheeks and open-mouthed smirks indicate that the couple have violated modern rules of behavior. But if we imagine that the man is holding an Apple phone, the picture is relevant and can be uploaded to Instagram as part of today's everyday life. For all its entertainment and gratuitous function, genre painting is not devoid of moralizing. Another moralistic painting by Hals is Pancake Day by Merry Makers, c. 1616 to 1717. Pancake Day, now better known as Mardi Gras, is the traditional period of indulgence before Lent and the self-discipline of Lent. In the 17th century Netherlands, it was also the occasion for theatrical performances of the artist guilds. Here, Hals depicts two standard figures from these plays: Hans Vorst with a sausage dangling from his cap, and Peckelharing with a garland of salted fish and eggs. A combination of genre scene and still life. An old husband gently embracing his young wife, and she clearly has an interest in the cocky bad guy behind the back of the old man, who unequivocally offers the young woman indiscretion. On the other hand, the second man clearly confirms his adulterous intentions with his movements and laughs at the prospect of the old husband. Recall that 17th century Holland was the only state where the urban population outnumbered the rural population. The richest merchant country was rich and prosperous. Paintings depicting an abundance of various things, including groceries, became commonplace. It is known that still life, as a separate genre, entered into painting with the light hand of Caravaggio. But it was in Holland that it gained scale and sophistication. Jean Calvin taught that everyday things have a hidden meaning, and that behind every representation there must be a moral lesson. The objects depicted in still life have many meanings. They were endowed with instructive, religious, or other connotations. Typical of Dutch genre paintings of the first half of the 17th century: kitchen scene, Pieter Twelve Danish, 1620s. The canvas is replete with visual jokes of a frankly erotic nature, such as the vivid depiction of meat on a skewer. The smirks of the maid and the errand boy indicate that they are enjoying each other's company, and the lavishly depicted foods surrounding them hint at carnal pleasures. This combination of risque humor with an abundance of still life elements had deep roots in Dutch painting. In other paintings, oysters were considered an erotic symbol, and this was obvious to contemporaries. Oysters supposedly stimulated sexual potency, and Venus, the goddess of love, was born from the shell. On the one hand, the oysters suggested worldly temptations, but on the other, the open shell indicated a soul ready to leave the body, which meant salvation. There were no strict rules of how to read a still life, of course, and the viewer guessed at the symbols he wanted to see on the canvas. Besides, one should not forget that each subject was a part of the composition and could be read differently, depending on the context and the overall message of the still life. A tall glass vessel often appears in still lifes. It symbolizes the fragility of human life. If the glass is half full, it is a call for moderation, and empty means death. A bottle symbolizes drunkenness, a knife symbolizes betrayal, and silverware symbolizes wealth. Sometimes a variety of food in a painting embodies the four elements: air, live or dead birds, butterflies and dragonflies, water, fish and shellfish, earth, fruits, vegetables and grains, fire, sunlight or bread. Another popular type of Dutch still life is table setting. A variety of fruits, seafood, drinks, and other objects all have their own meaning. Here is a small list of edible symbols: ripe fruit, wealth and prosperity, bunch of grapes and pomegranate, sacrifice of Christ, lemon, betrayal or disappointment, apple, reminder of the fall, ham, gluttony, oysters, worldly temptations and adultery, bread and wine, sacrament of communion, fish, symbol of Christ and fasting food, wheat ears, sign of rebirth and renewal. The main morale of Dutch still lifes is to remind us of death and eternal life. The philosophically and moral still life got its Latin name vanitas, vanity of vanities, an allusion to Ecclesiastes. Still lifes of this type first appeared in Flemish painting in the 17th century and then spread in Holland, Italy, and Spain. A typical still life vanitas depicted objects in one way or another associated with the fatality of human life: a skull, an extinguished candle, a clock, a book, musical instruments, wilted flowers, rotting fruit, overturned or broken crockery, playing with cards and dice, smoking pipes, soap bubbles, etc. At times, the artist included in the work one or another Latin saying of the subject of vanity of vanities: vanitas vanitatum, memento mori, sic transit gloria mundi, etc. As a rule, still lifes were painted in dark colors, with predominance of gray-brown scale. The depicted objects were usually arranged in an accentuated, haphazard way. This was supposed to demonstrate a disregard for their material value, as well as to symbolize the futility of human deeds. There are no pockets in the coffin. One only takes one soul with him to heaven. A floral still life also came into use. A still life of flowers. Up to the 18th century, a bunch of flowers usually symbolizes fertility, because earthly pleasures are as transitory as the beauty of the flower. The symbolicism of plants is particularly complex and ambiguous, and to grasp the meaning helped popular in the 26th and 27th centuries books of emblems, where allegorical illustrations and slogans were accompanied by explanatory text. Floral compositions were not easy to interpret. One and the same flower had many meanings, sometimes directly opposite. For example, the narcissist indicated narcissism, at the same time was considered a symbol of the Mother of God, along with the lily. In still lifes, as a rule, both meanings of the image were preserved, and the viewer was free to choose one of the two meanings or to combine them. Floral compositions were often supplemented with fruits, small objects, images of animals. These images express the main idea of the work, emphasizing the motif of transience, fading, sinfulness of all earthly things, and imperishability of virtue.